Hello, welcome to this lecture series sponsored by the Center for International Trade, Investment, Environmental, and Energy Law. I am David Gantz, a professor of international trade and investment law in the United States, and I am pleased to be able to participate. A word or two on my background. After graduating from Harvard College and Stanford Law School, I spent several years in Costa Rica with the U.S. Agency for International Development. I clerked for a year on the Court of Appeals in the United States, and then spent a number of years in the State Department Legal Advisor's Office. Following that, I was a private practitioner in Washington, D.C., where I specialized again in international trade and investment law. I have been a full-time law professor since 1993. The area which we wish to talk about over the next 7 sessions, liberalizing international trade after Doha, in my view, is an extremely important one for the world economy. As we will discuss, and many of you are aware, the efforts by the World Trade Organization through the so-called Doha Development Round of negotiations to further liberalize international trade in goods and services have foundered. There has been no significant progress in these negotiations since about 2008. So the question that is facing us all today, at a time of great economic difficulty in much of the world, is how, if at all, are we able to liberalize trade and keep going the process of trade liberalization that has been operating more or less continuously since 1947. It's a difficult time for trade negotiation. The U.S. economy is relatively strong. However, economies in many other parts of the world are suffering, including those in much of Asia and Latin America, due to the Chinese economic slowdown, a slowdown which unfortunately does not seem likely to be reversed for at least a year or two. The European Union is also affected by its own internal issues, including problems with the Eurozone in Greece, and also a refugee situation which they are finding difficult to deal with. So, given these conditions, which in my view make it more important than ever that major trading nations continue to move forward in the directions which were established 65 years ago, the question is, what can we do to keep this process moving forward? And in the course and in the book, I have basically looked at 4 alternatives to multilateral trade negotiations in Geneva. The first is to try to deal with the agreements of limited scope, like the Trade Facilitation Agreement. The second is to deal with so-called plurilateral agreements, not with the entire 162 members of the WTO, but with groups of those who are willing to go further, as in the area of services. Then to spend quite a bit of time on what appears to be the major area where trade liberalization is possible today, and that is the dozens of new regional trade agreements that are being negotiated by many major countries in the world, including the U.S., the EU, and China among them. Finally, I want to look at so-called unilateral measures, the changes in laws and regulations and economic and legal policies that have in the past produced a high level of economic development in the so-called 4 tigers of Asia: Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore, and are now producing similar progress in what I call the 4 jaguars of Latin America: Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Peru. If there is to be further trade liberalization in the next few years, it is almost certain to come in one or more of these 4